The Ohio Farm Bureau podcast live at the OABA Industry Conference. Chris Henney is their president and CEO. Thanks for being with us today.
Ty, thanks for having me. It's great to have you here with us at our conference and to be on your podcast.
There is so much to talk about. We're looking at the future quite a bit during these couple of days here in Columbus, but really a chance, I guess we could say, commiserate about 2022 and all the challenges we saw as an industry. Look at transportation in particular with a possible rail strike. We had Mississippi River going dry, having trouble getting things up and down the river there. Driver shortages as far as 18-wheelers go. Not to mention the war in Ukraine and everything else that came with weather and markets in 2022. But just like Ohio Farm Bureau members, OAB members pretty resilient as well, getting through those challenges.
Well, that's right. You named all the challenges, Ty. I couldn't have listed them better myself. What makes me so proud of our members is how they really worked with your members, farmers, to get them what they needed in a timely manner. And so we had a lot of challenges last spring and through the year, but we worked together to get through it, right? And that just speaks to resiliency, the theme of this year's conference, and the great partnership that we have in agriculture in Ohio.
For those who don't know about the Ohio AgriBusiness Association, what do your members consist of?
Well, I like to say that our members are all those companies that provide services and supplies to Ohio's farmers. But it's really beyond that, because traditionally we're grain, feed, seed, fertilizer, ag chemical. But today we have financial institutions, insurance companies, we have public relations firms, law firms, but a really growing area is technology, both hardware and software. And with all the connectedness that we have in our equipment these days and in our livestock operations, technology companies are definitely growing amongst our members.
It really is agriculture in the future, very technology heavy, and we're learning about drones and learning about software and everything that's going to be coming down the line over the next couple of years here at the OABA Industry Conference. Let's look ahead just 1 year. We have possibly a new farm bill coming out later on this year, and of course, we're watching things like crop insurance and Title I programs and conservation programs, things that we feel like need to remain in the Farm Bill in 2023 and beyond. What are some of the things on top of mind for your members?
Well, the Ohio AgriBusiness Association supports good Farm Bill policy that helps the farmer, because that's our members' customer. And so what's good for the farmer is good for agribusiness. That's the bottom line. But to get a little more detailed, the conservation title is important to us, especially as we think about water quality in Ohio, where we seem to be ground zero for a lot of the water quality stuff we see across the country. Working lands conservation programs is important to us. And so those are the kind of things that we're working on. In fact, I'm taking a few members next week to DC to meet with our congressional delegation to start talking Farm Bill and some other priority issues for the year.
Education is going to be so important for these members of Congress. Almost half of them have never had a chance to work on a Farm Bill before, so getting out to DC and having those face-to-face interactions is very important. We work a lot together. You and I are in the same room quite a bit with our organizations. How do we work together, and why do we work so well together?
Well, I think we're fortunate in Ohio because we have strong relationships, whether it be Ohio Farm Bureau, OABA, our commodity group friends, livestock, corn, soy, you name it. We've worked hard to develop those relationships and maintain them. It's really important, and it's for the benefit of Ohio agriculture and farmers that we do work so well together. And we'll be crossing paths many times over the coming months, working on the Farm Bill, working with Governor DeWine on his proposed budget, which was just announced yesterday. So I'm thankful and feel blessed that we do have such a good working relationship in Ohio agriculture.
Get a lot done as a group of organizations all across Ohio, and really with the help of OABA getting a lot of those priority issues taken care of at the state and federal level as well. We're going to have more from the OABA Industry Conference coming up next, talking about drones in agriculture and also some pesticide issues after this. Boy, the conversation is exciting about ag technology in the future, and we continue the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast with Mitch White. He's with Raven, one of the speakers at the OABA Industry Conference here in Columbus. You at your company, Raven, have been on a path to autonomy since 1978.
Absolutely.
Where are we now, and where do you see this going?
Yeah, so I think we're at an inflection point where we're taking all of this technology that we've developed since 1978, simple things like flow controls, all the way up to our sub-inch accuracy GPS receivers, and we're really tying that all together and bringing autonomous solutions to market.
What's driving ag technology these days?
Yeah, so like we talked during the presentation today, a lot of those challenges with labor, loss of arable land, more regulations and restrictions, those are the products that we're finding our customers are getting value from.
What are the barriers in today's marketplace?
Yeah, so supply chain, like was mentioned earlier, has potential to impact the rate at which we can deploy solutions, but then a real in-depth understanding from that customer that wants to deploy that technology of, hey, if we're really thinking about alleviating human interaction, that's got to go somewhere, and leveraging an ecosystem and getting them to understand that it's an ecosystem approach of, hey, I've got to predefine some things, I've got to plan to do those things, and then I've got to execute those things. Just like they do today in their subconscious, but pull into that field once. You've made a lot of decisions already, and we've got to put that onto a machine, or you have to predefine that.
I'll never forget, it was about 5 years ago, I saw a video of a farmer sitting at his desk, and he was able to control everything that happened on his operation right there on the desktop, moving things from point A to point B. I know we're not quite there yet, but how close are we to having more of these tractors that drive themselves and having more autonomy where we can place nutrients and the right amount of nutrients right where you need them at the right place and the right time? How close are we to having all that automated?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Ty. So what we're seeing is, you take a Raven-equipped sprayer or spreader out of the factory today, and I like to summarize it best. Literally, once that operator gets that field opened up, they're along for the ride. They need to control the speed, and they need to be the perception system. So read through the lines, and I think we're closer than we've been.
You mentioned the letters RTK.
Yeah.
For those listening that may not know about that or know a little bit about it, tell us about what RTK is and how you see that fitting into this conversation.
Yeah, so RTK is, what we would consider today to be the premium, repeatable, highest accuracy GPS correction source available to the public. There might be something that we don't know about. We don't know about it though. So, and what that does is it enables us to define an area and repeat that area multiple times, whether it's the path inside of it or whether it's the section control of that application tool. And that's going to be critical as we move ahead to ensure that we're accurately and safely applying or navigating where we need to.
As you hear presentations like Mitch, you begin to think about some of the priority issues we have at Ohio Farm Bureau. Of course, here in Ohio, we have Lake Erie and the Ohio River and water quality and nutrient management. Big issues here in the Buckeye State. These types of technologies, though, can go a long way in helping farmers do more of the right things on their acres.
Absolutely. So, we've got a product called the Raven Rate Control Module, which has 200 different applications, from liquid application to dry applications, and almost any toolbar application you could envision inside of that. And that is, we consider that to be the most precise application control system in the market, right? Now, feeding it real-time information based on in-field attributes, I think that those are the things, your variable rate prescriptions and being able to execute those accurately, complemented by that RTK, ensuring it's in the right place. That's where we start to make a difference.
Not to mention soil testing, which is a big part of the H2 Ohio program we have here in Ohio as well. Where are we with drones? You talk about a Jetsons type of agriculture. I have seen more drones this year than I thought I'd ever see. Starting to see more and more of that adoption, at least in the field trials and farmers curious about how it might be able to fit in their operation.
Yeah, so the drone space is exciting. There'll be a presentation later today about drones, and they've got to fit, right? So particularly in that image sensing, generating some of that real-time information or near real-time information, so we are being good stewards of the land. So we're reducing and only applying nutrients or crop protections where needed. That imagery could be utilized there. The other side is at some level of application. There will be an application for them. It might be in the trials. It might be in that tougher spot of the field, or we're seeing kudos to those folks, but where they're actually able to complement the aerial applicators.
Last but not least, all this technology, all this data entry, all this futuristic look at agriculture really isn't much without rural broadband. And we have seen more and more access to rural broadband. We passed legislation last year and some money in the budget for an expansion here in Ohio. We're seeing it at the federal level as well. How important is that part of this futuristic concept we're looking at to be able to have reliable broadband and Wi-Fi on the farm?
Yeah, so it comes down to two things there. It's having that connectivity, which we are seeing great expansions in that, or having systems that are capable of running without it and being redundant, right? So they could execute what had been planned while we were in that area. Example would be at a much lesser scale, our digital work order tool. You assign that work to a person, they go out, they lose cellular connectivity, they execute that work. Upon re-entering or reconnecting with the cellular network, that information's uploaded. So it's really understanding where that balance lies, and we've got a great team of engineers working very hard to determine those things for us.
We are hearing more and more farmers picking up that rural broadband, able to get more broadband for less money than they're paying now. So big strides happening in farm country as far as broadband is concerned. Mitch White with Raven. If someone wants to find out more about the technology you're offering, how can they do so?
Visit our website at ravenind.com or look up many of our different vendors at the upcoming trade shows, and always look forward to the Farm Progress one as our staple event.
Thanks, Mitch.
Awesome. Thank you, Ty.
Find out how Nationwide AgriBusiness can help you grow your business. Get to know the people with the experience and knowledge to help you. Whether you are looking to protect your farm or ranch from the ground up, or need someone who understands your changing commercial ag needs. Find out how to better manage the risks of your ag business, or how quickly you can get back to business. Learn how you can protect your next with Nationwide on your side.
Hard not to remember back in early 2022 when some pesticides were taken away from Ohio farmers in certain counties due to the EPA and the Endangered Species Act. And that, of course, leads us to more questions about some of the challenges that might be upcoming for pesticides in agriculture. Joining me is the U.S. State Affairs expert with Syngenta, Dave Flakne. And you just were here at the OABA conference talking about the future of pesticides and some of the challenges. And really what it boils down to, according to the panel that we had here at the conference, is a lack of public understanding. And we see that a lot in agriculture. We are multiple generations away from the farm, and people just don't understand what goes into production agriculture.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and you know, our country's become more urbanized, and that gets to the point of being multiple generations away from the farm. And you know, the urban folks, you know, have a passion for the food that they eat, but they don't understand at all how that food comes to be, how it remains plentiful and nutritious and all. So, you know, I think when you talk about the pesticide industry and the seed and crop protection and biotechnology industry, we have an uphill battle to make sure that the public understands that the tools we're using are highly regulated, they're very well stewarded into the environment, and we have a lot to be proud of.
How stringent is the regulatory process here in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, you know, to register a pesticide, it takes somewhere upwards of 10 years, and the estimates now are over $100 million worth of investment.
Wow.
And those are environmental fate studies and ecological studies, wildlife studies, human health studies, before we can answer all the questions about the safety of the product. And then we do all the efficacy testing to make sure that it provides value to our customers on top of that as well.
We talk about education, we think about that consumer standpoint, right? But EPA and some of the employees in that agency also don't know a lot about the agriculture industry. There has to be an education component at that level as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I honestly believe that all of our public servants that work at US EPA and at the State Departments of Agriculture and elsewhere are passionate about of what they do, right? They are there to register products that help production agriculture advance and get more efficient. But they have very little understanding, just like the general public, about the day-to-day. You could be a toxicologist at EPA, you can be an ecotoxicologist at EPA, but you've never stepped foot on a farm, and you're making decisions about stewardship and practices that might be put into place to mitigate any risk that might be there from the product, but you've never stepped foot on a farm. It's really hard to understand whether what you're proposing makes sense or not in the real world.
I want to talk about politics because it seems that EPA, of course, they're always the Environmental Protection Agency, but a lot of the decisions change. They come and go based on who's in the White House. So how much do politics play a role in what we're talking about today?
Well, they clearly play a role. I will say that agriculture is probably the most bipartisan industry in America. We have strong advocates on both sides of the aisle. I will also say that, yes, politics too come into the process. I mean, we have been through a process with the re-registration of atrazine and actually completed that registration review. The science-based decisions were made in prior administrations, even before the Trump administration, but the final registration, completed registration, was finished during the Trump administration. Science decisions before that even. But the new administration comes in and all of a sudden we're in a process right now of going through the ecological risk assessment yet again. And the EPA has proposed a new level of concern that 3 prior science advisory panels have said is totally out of line, that the number should be up around 20, and they're proposing a 3.4 part per billion level of concern. Science doesn't support that. We're in the process of probably having another science advisory panel yet again, a 4th science advisory panel to argue the science, and we think that atrazine will get through that process, but it is frustrating at times that a new administration comes in and you have to relitigate the registration decision.
Those are level-headed conversations, the ones we have with consumers, with educating them, the one we have with the EPA and USDA to some extent. Then you have the outliers, the activist groups that really don't want to see pesticide use at all. What are some of the strategies being used by that group of people?
Well, it's been really challenging. I mean, they've tried legislative attempts at the federal level. They've tried to, regulate our industry or take away tools at state legislatures. And for the most part, because of the bipartisan nature and the trust that policymakers do have in EPA, we have an EPA that is by far the most credible science review agency in the world. So, they give deference to that, the policymakers do. So when the activists don't get their way legislatively, what their attempts have been lately is to go to the courts and try to find some little reason to litigate and question or second guess an EPA decision. We've seen where a court has vacated the dicamba registration, and then EPA had to go back to the go back and re-register and go back to the courts with a decision that responded to that vacature that happened on dicamba. And we're fighting those battles every day. Every registration decision, new product that's brought to the market, and re-registration decision seems to wind up in the Ninth Circuit Court, and the activists are suing because they try to say that EPA hasn't done something in the process right. And it's a never-ending battle, and as an industry, we're here to defend our products. The agency does a pretty good job of defending their process and responding to those challenges, but in reality, we have a framework for registering products that's second to none in the world, and the general public should be pretty, and the agricultural community should be pretty proud of the fact that the tools we have are safe and effective.
I mentioned that fiasco in early 2022 with Enlist and Enlist Duo, taking it out of the hands of farmers, at least in a dozen or more counties across Ohio for a short period of time. We got that remedied, but still that shows us there's opportunity for more of those things to happen in the future that we have to be aware of. In fact, one of Ohio Farm Bureau's policy issues is to keep EPA in check. As far as setting policies for the future, what does that look like to you at Syngenta?
Well, the future's, there's going to be some new processes and challenges in the future. We are governed by the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act, FIFRA. It's been amended in 1996 with the Food Quality Protection Act that put additional safeguards in place. But there is an overarching scheme known as the Endangered Species Act that basically takes primacy over all other federal laws. So one of the requirements in that is that EPA consult with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the marine fisheries on any regulatory decision to make sure that it's not going to have an impact on threatened or endangered species. So that process has been somewhat broken over the past number of years. There isn't a staff at the services to do those reviews. And so the agency has gone about their business. A lot of these lawsuits are predicated on the fact that EPA hasn't done its due diligence on the Endangered Species Act. So now EPA has set up a framework to try to account for endangered species in their registration decisions. And that's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out, because it could make the labels very cumbersome and difficult to manage. We saw with the Enlist label that there were these mitigation options or pick list options that a grower might need to pick from. In the recent atrazine proposal, they were also saying if we lower that number to here, you're going to be required to have these pick list options on the label. And when you look at a lot of those options, they're not things that a grower can do readily, efficiently, and without a great deal of cost. So, are you going to make the decision to use a product that is very, very inexpensive, $5, $6 an acre, to add atrazine to a mix to control weed resistance and to sustain no-till, if you got to spend $50, $60, $70, $80 on mitigation practices? It becomes very challenging economically for a grower to figure out, how do I do this? And so we're going to see that play out as all new registrations come forward, and it's going to be incumbent upon, I think, the growers and the dealers and the ag community, USDA, to weigh in with EPA on realistically what should those mitigation options look like, and what should a label look like to address the needs of both FIFRA and the Endangered Species Act.
Dave Flakne is with Syngenta. Before I let you go, the R&D process with companies like yours always fascinates me. Talking about $1 million a day, and then he talked about earlier the process of 10 plus years getting something to registration. There is an issue though with labor in all of agriculture, but also within the EPA. Not enough hands on deck to really get the job done in a timely manner. What is being done about that?
So the industry, I'm trying to think exactly how many years ago we passed PREA, which is the Pesticide Registration Improvement Act. Just this December, PREA was reauthorized for the 5th time. And in that reauthorization, we as an industry proposed an increase in our fees so that EPA had more money to hire more folks so that they could improve their process. The agencies, just like everybody else, like you mentioned, is struggling with employees. They're down from like 1,200 employees that worked in the FIFRA-based programming and pesticide registration process to about 600 today.
Wow.
And the goal is to have them have enough funding to be able to hire more people to make sure that they can do their work in a timely manner to bring new products to the growers and manage the issues that we have out on the farm.
Dave, I appreciate your time.
Yep, very, very happy to chat with you.
Like what you hear, follow the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast on social media, and also wherever you listen to podcasts, you can like, subscribe, or follow. Appreciate you listening. I'm Ty Higgins. We'll see you down the road.